Thank you, Chairman Corbett Sanders, members of the school board. It's an exciting moment to have you all here at the inaugural school board session for 2020, and it's exciting that that coincides with my proposed budget presentation here for FY21. This is a budget, I am pleased tonight to tell you, invests in excellence in Fairfax County Public Schools. This is a budget that does keep the main thing, and invests in our teachers and support staff with market-based compensation and provides additional supports, particularly social-emotional supports for our students to ensure student success. Let me show you the strategic plan focus that we have had to guide us for the last 2 years. This is a budget that we continue to align around our strategic plan. There are 4 major categories in our strategic focus: student success, caring culture, premier workforce, and resource stewardship. Under each of those 4 buckets are desired outcomes that we've been particularly focused on, 8 of them. For student success, portrait of a graduate, attributes for every child, elimination of access, opportunity, and achievement gaps, and a focus on early education and school readiness. For caring culture, we've really focused on a welcoming environment in all of our schools and offices and healthy life choices for our students and employees. For premier workforce, we focused on market-based compensation, particularly for our teachers, but for all of our employees, and continuing to do everything we can to retain, attract, promote, and recognize exceptional employees. And for resource stewardship, our final category, efficient budgeting and allocation. This is a budget where in our total budget, 82% of our budget invests in the categories of student success and premier workforce. And tonight, I'll be asking for an additional $172 million in resources. 84% of those dollars will be focused on student success and premier workforce. We're committed to having a budget that really does promote academic excellence here in Fairfax County Public Schools while providing social-emotional supports for kids. And I look forward to sharing with you the work that we've done in the slides ahead. One of the things that you know in Fairfax County, we have been a system that has maintained a legacy of excellence. We have sought to be and strive to be the premier school district, not just in the Commonwealth, but in the country, and to be recognized around the world for our work. You can see here we've maintained a very strong 91% graduation on time rate. We've seen 89% of our graduates attend post-secondary programs, 86% of our kids earning at least one industry certification, so important to our workforce. Over 70% of our students passing an AP, IB, or dual enrollment course. We've seen our SAT scores continue to rise over the last 2 or 3 years. We continue to have high levels of national merit scholars, lots of scholarship awards, over $100 million, and we continue to see kids recognized for their contributions at CAPIs in the arts, along with service hours in the community. And we've continued to be maintained a school district by several organizations. As you know, each year our opportunity really is to invest in excellence. And the FY21 budget, next year's budget, will represent the 150th year of Fairfax providing public education in this county. Our goal has been excellence, but we've had to define that for every generation. And I share with you tonight that our generation's challenge, this new board's challenge, working together in partnership, is excellence through equity for every child. We need to have, and this budget does have, a journey to ensure that every child, by name and by need, receives an equitable education that is inclusive and respectful, where access, opportunity, and achievement are afforded to all. This is the vision of One Fairfax that the Fairfax County School Board, this board passed, and the Board of Supervisors passed. And we will provide excellence through equity here in Fairfax County Public Schools. If you look at our budget, we really focus on our strategic plan goal areas: student success, caring culture, premier workforce, and resource stewardship. I want you to know this is a $3.2 billion school operating budget, which is a 5.8% increase over last year. And our largest investments, as I shared with you in our initial slide, are around student success and premier workforce. 54% of what we have proposed is aligned to student success, 29% for premier workforce. I want to show you now the changes in the budget compared to last year that are in this FY20 budget. And again, they're broken out by strategic goal area. You see student success, caring culture, premier workforce, and resource stewardship. I'm going to go now and go through each one of those goals in more detail and give you some additional insights. First, for student success. The first area under student success, again, almost $50 million around student success. One of our largest areas of focus is first our global student success. All of the things that we're doing in our programming to make our students have success here in Fairfax County. The first item is over $28 million in this budget to support enrollment and student demographics. We are seeing growth in Fairfax County schools. We're seeing an 8% growth in general education and our general education students. But we're also seeing changing demographics at higher growth rates. We're seeing a growth rate of EL students at 2.2%, or English language, a growth rate for special education students at 3.5%, and a growth rate for our free and reduced eligible students at almost 7%. Greater, all of those growth rates are greater than the general education growth rate. We need to continue. Last year in the budget, we actually saw a slight decline in our enrollment, and in this year's budget, we're seeing growth of over 28 million. We also have on here a high school assistant director of student activities staffing. We have provided for years 0.5 staffing. This budget would move it to 0.75. We've seen the growth of our extracurricular and activity programs, which sometimes are a lifeline, a connection that changes student achievement in the classroom. The reality is we've looked at our school staffing. Almost all of our high schools trade staffing that could be going for classrooms and class size to have support for this assistant director of student athletics and activities. This is a top priority of our high schools to get provided more direct, dedicated staffing to support those extracurricular programs so that they can better support students in their schools. One of the other things that I want to share with you is under Student Success Global is online campus. Additional dollars here in the budget to support the growing number of kids who are choosing online campus as part of their education. Another important part of student success is elimination of gaps. We need to remove, as I shared in the strategic plan focus, we need to remove access and opportunity gaps so that we can remove achievement gaps. And the first thing that I have here is, for the first time ever in the history of Fairfax County, I am putting in funding to support a chair leadership position in up to 70 elementary schools with large special education populations. It will be 0.5 in dedicated staffing. We currently have teachers who are on full teaching loads trying to be lead special education teachers in our schools. We have a successful model at middle and high where we've had a department chair at our middle and high, but our elementary haven't been designed by departments. This is a proactive response, and this chair position will help us not only include best practices in special education instruction, not only ensure better monitoring and compliance of special education policies and procedures, but also will serve as a true leader in the building to help make sure that we are. I urge you to support this. This will also be a position that will help us deal with behavior and crisis management issues around our special education students. I am very excited to share the proactive work that Teresa Johnson and Dr. Duran and their staffs have been doing in creating an unprecedented position that has never existed before in Fairfax County Public Schools. I also have dollars in here to continue FCPS on at our high schools. We closed the digital divide in Fairfax County last year by providing that. Kimberly can share with you her feedback and those of other students for that work that we did this year. We had FCPS on in some schools and high schools, but not in all. And I have in this budget to continue that work in the high school and to expand it to our middle schools in Fairfax County. Also in here, we have dollars to support Office of School Support expansion. This is a program that started with about 40 schools 4 or 5 years ago for schools that were facing accreditation challenges. When I got here, it was a program that was working, and I expanded the Office of School Support to provide it across all schools and all regions, a designated team of folks to help in schools. This Office of School expansion will have 3 position conversions for an assistant superintendent and 2 directors, and some new funding for a resource teacher and an executive AA to provide additional supports to schools. And I will expand the responsibilities of the Office of School Support into a department that includes testing, that includes non-traditional schools, what we formerly used to call our alternative schools. They haven't had the same OSS wraparound support that we've created for our comprehensive community schools. And I'm very, very excited about that. The department will also bring in our multi-tiered systems of support team and integrate that into our Office of School Supports. That's part of our theory of action to provide the necessary academic and social-emotional supports for kids. So I look forward to sharing with you more details about that expansion in a future work session. I also want you to know, as part of the gaps, there's some contractual support for our testing fees. We've always supported PSAT testing in Fairfax. I have money in this budget, however, to start next year a pilot at 2 to 3 high schools for a SAT testing day where we would pay for every child's SAT test in a high school where our participation rates in SAT are lower, or we're not seeing the kind of growth trajectory on SAT scores that we've seen at other schools across the county. There's also, you can see, a few dollars finally for early education. Those dollars are to maintain as our salaries rise for teachers is great. Much of this funding comes from federal and other grants, so we need to supplement that because the grant money isn't keeping pace with the additional salaries that we have been proposing. For Goal 2, Caring Culture, this is about $15 million to support caring culture. First, a welcoming environment, contract services. Those are dollars to support our parent liaisons. I really want to focus on the welcoming environment that we would have in this budget for the first time a restraint and seclusion compliance specialist whose job would be to ensure that all of our schools in Fairfax County are following state and local regulations around restraint and seclusion, and provide division-wide training for those areas as well. Also in this budget is dollars to support a culturally responsive resource teacher, the first for the Equity Office, that would focus on targeted professional development to explore identity, diversity, equity, and actions through additional equity symposias. We started one last year for the whole division, but we need to do equity, not just a symposia for a division. We need to be doing that pyramid by pyramid, region by region, school by school, and there are dollars in there to support that work. The other area around healthy life choices, the largest piece of that is our health insurance. We continue to see increased health insurance rates. That's part of the national market trend, and Fairfax is not immune to it. And there's an additional $13 million. It's growing at a rate of about 5%. One of the things last year at year end, we did put in additional substance abuse prevention specialists as we re-changed. This prior board redesigned the SR&R to deal with first-time kids dealing with substance abuse issues to stay in their schools and not be moved to another school. But we need to provide social emotional supports if they are going to remain in the school. We added 7 substance abuse prevention specialists using one-time money. This budget makes sure that those specialists become ongoing moving forward. And I'm adding in the budget this year dollars for an additional 3.5 additional positions for substance prevention specialists. Working with the county, I hope by FY22 to have a substance abuse prevention specialist for every pyramid in Fairfax County Public Schools. There's additional dollars in here for behavior intervention services. One of the things we realized last year is we need to renew our focus if we're going to deal with behavior in our schools on professional development to give our teachers and staff the tools necessary to deal with challenging behaviors in schools, and I have an additional $100,000 that would support that work. Premier Workforce, as you can see, is almost $95 million, by far the largest component. But as I've shared with you before, Fairfax County, the difference is the people. The talent in this school system is unrivaled anywhere in the country, and I dare say the world. We have been attracting the best and brightest year after year, and we need to be sure that we continue to provide market competitive compensation for our teachers and for our support staff. People really are the secret sauce in Fairfax County Public Schools. Market competitive compensation will consist of a 1% market scale adjustment for all of our employees and scale enhancement dollars to really look at our salary scales to see where we can continue to make additional enhancements to be competitive with the market. We also have dollars to get our CIS, or what you used to call, or we used to call instructional assistants, back to where their pay is equal to 50% of teacher pay. The prior board asked for that to be a priority. We began it in this year's current budget. There's a 3-year plan to get us to that 50%, and this represents the second year of that 3-year plan to get our instructional assistants to 50% of teacher salary. For exceptional employees, we have our largest single amount of dollars, which is a step increase for eligible employees of a little over $50 million, which averages about a 2.5% increase per employee. Our VRS rates are going up, not because we did anything, but frankly the state has changed the rate of return rate for VRS. Even though the stock market continues to, at the moment, do well, they've lowered that rate for the future, and so they've asked employers, which are school districts, to add in a higher contribution. Those dollars reflect that higher contribution rate to maintain our retirement well. There's some additional dollars for workman's comp. I'm proud to tell you in this budget that for the first time in 15 years, I am restoring pay parity between elementary principals and middle school principals. The job of the elementary principal has become more and more complex. They do not have the same level of resources that our middle and high schools have had sometimes for staffing, just as we talked about for special ed a minute ago. And I am bringing back what happened 15 years ago where they were at the same level of pay. This will be a 2-year plan to do principals now and to bring our assistant principals to the same pay equity in FY22. I also think that this pay equity will enhance our ability to provide more leadership opportunities for our school-based administrators. I knew through my career one of the struggles is were you tracked as a school-based administrator for elementary only or for secondary only. This is going to allow us to give more folks a chance to cross between elementary and secondary as they seek leadership positions, and ultimately for some of them who ultimately will become system leaders and need a firm grasp of the school system from both an elementary and a secondary perspective. There's also dollars in here for professional development, for an ed specialist and a resource teacher to help us develop and implement a division-wide comprehensive plan. Professional development is one of the things that has been cut in the budget over the years when we had leaner times, And it has hurt us because we have not been doing enough of the leadership development and training necessary for our staff as demands have increased and expectations have increased. These would be dollars that would continue to support the development of the curriculum and resources and to deliver it. We have developed a comprehensive professional development program, and I would love and will be bringing to you this spring in a work session what that comprehensive professional development program looks like for your review. I also have dollars in here to redesign our talent acquisition and management staffing group under Human Resources so that we're doing everything we can to continue to attract and retain our personnel. And I am proud that we need to continue to recognize our commitment to having a diverse workforce, to having a staff that matches the diversity of our students and our community. And so I'm calling for dollars to support a nationally recognized program called Call Me Mr. that focuses on males and particularly males of color. And we need to do more and more to bring underrepresented groups into our teaching force, into our school system. I think Call Me Mr. is the right step toward doing more to support and signal that we are committed to a diverse staff here in Fairfax County Public Schools. There's dollars for Trades to Tomorrow. We had one-time money in last year's budget that supported student interns who begin to get jobs like we used to do in Fairfax County 15, 20 years ago, where you could become an intern in the trades, plumbing and carpentry and electrical. This is making sure that that program continues ongoing, and we need to look at ways that we can continue to grow that in the years ahead if we're going to truly do workforce development here in Fairfax County Public Schools. You'll also see some savings from compensation-based savings, which is the turnover of folks from one year to another. That's a savings of $19 million. But actually, it's been on the decline a little bit, the savings, because we've seen an uptick in our folks staying with us and not leaving Fairfax County Public Schools. For Goal 4, resource, you'll see about $12 million there. The first is $6 million, almost half really, is for a staffing initiatives placeholder. This was something we put in last year for the board to talk about what are some additional needs for the system. I have some recommendations that I'm going to share with you in the very next slide based on the board conversations that we've had thus far and based on some of the conversations I've had with some of you who are now just coming in. Ultimately, that will be something you all will have to decide permanently about what would fill in that placeholder. Separate from that, there are some things around utilities to look at, transfer to other funds, school construction, and our cable communication program. One of the things I want to call your attention to here in this is for facilities trades. I talked about the student intern positions. There's also funding in here for 2 positions at least for apprentice positions. These are permanent positions, almost like that starting level for the trades positions. We want kids to go in a pipeline from being in a CTE class to being a student intern to having these journeyman apprenticeship positions. I'm sorry, I drifted off in explaining that continuum. We want our kids to be students in CTE classrooms, to then move to be student interns, getting an internship opportunity in the trades, to then getting that apprentice position. We had that continuum 15, 20 years ago. We've got to begin step by step to build it back in Fairfax County Public Schools. I also want to make just one other notion on here, even though it says $0 about position reallocation and conversion. Over last year, the Office of Auditor General did a review, an internal review, and issued a report around trades. We saw that we had multiple year after year folks having to trade hourly or logistic funds for positions. Jobs were cut over the last several years in the budget, and people scrambled to use their existing dollars to continue to try to do the work. Even though the jobs were cut, the workload remained. And they would continue to trade year after year. There is no additional budget change to this. We are reducing hourly and logistic accounts, but we're going ahead and saying transparently that if you're year after year trading for this position, this is a position that needs to be noted through the budget process as opposed to a trade process. Finally, there's a little bit of dollars here at the end for efficient budgeting and allocation in our contract services for our visitor management system, which is really our security as you enter all of our offices. And while I'm just mentioning security, I know this is a new board and maybe didn't realize the actions in December with the old board. At mid-year, we did spend one-time money to support the addition of middle school cameras outside and inside up to 8 additional middle schools, which has been a top priority for our middle school principals. Let me show you the staffing placeholder recommendations. I said again, this is a $6 million placeholder, but I want to share some strong ideas from hearing from you and hearing from folks on our staff. The first is dropout prevention. We've gone in our leadership team to a problem of practice approach. What are some of our top issues that we're dealing with in Fairfax County? You all have know as you engage with the community, what are some of our challenges? One of our challenges is our dropout rate. 2 of our schools this year were accredited with conditions for a non-academic indicator, but an indicator nevertheless around dropout rate. We need to be proactive in dealing with that. So we brought together a team of principals, stakeholders in the central office, and they brought a series of recommendations. They looked at the data. I am putting out a placeholder of $1.5 million that would support funding for on-time graduation coordinators at 9 schools where the dropout rate is higher than we want it to be. It would also provide English language learner support staffing at non-traditional schools where we have large numbers of English language learners, and to graduate, they just need that extra wraparound support to be able to be successful. And those dollars will support designing the data to make sure we're tracking the interventions for kids so that they're staying on track for graduation, and that we're better tracking the graduation credits. It's a manual process now. One of the things you'll be hearing that's been said for 4 years in the working conditions survey is many of our employees feel overwhelmed. We've got to take things in our work processes that we're doing manually and convert them to an automated process, and funds are there to do that for dropout prevention. I also have as a placeholder $1 million for advanced academic programs. Many of you may know last year we brought in a consultant to really relook completely at our discipline system. We got those results late in the spring, and one of the frustrations for the board is, Dr. Brabrand, these are great recommendations. How are we going to pay for them? This year, I am being proactive and putting aside $1 million as you get ready to hear consultant recommendations around advanced academics. You'll be hearing preliminary recommendations later this month and final recommendations by the consultant in March. I want to give you the dollars now to be prepared to be able to respond to those consultant recommendations, whether it's about additional training, additional, again, all of the potential menu of options to support our advanced academic programs. I also want to share with you in here a recommendation of about $800,000 for an equity per pupil in high school. Last year, the prior board asked us to look at the gate receipts of high schools, and it was illuminating. The gate receipts vary dramatically based on school. And the issue is that becomes an equity issue about what schools can do in terms of extracurricular activities, in terms of field trips, in terms of support for kids to have opportunities that exist in one school but do not exist in another. This working Dr. Duran has spent time doing a national review, and we've come up with a per pupil allocation based on students eligible for free and reduced lunch. We would need to determine that threshold for the school, much like a Title I. Where would you want that cut off to be to provide those dollars? To be able to supplement the student activity fund and provide greater equity for our schools, particularly as it regards to extracurricular activities. As we work on this issue, I want you to know, if you like it, we have a second year in FY22 planned to do the same sort of equity support at middle and elementary. Because even in elementary school, there are extracurricular programs that are available at one school because of the support of a PTA or PTO that may not exist in another. So I'd love to be and look forward to sharing with you our ideas around that equity per pupil. There's also on here school board support, and I put that as TBD. I need to be transparent, and this is a new board, to recognize that in December at the mid-year budget, there was placeholder dollars kept for school board support to provide staffing support for the school board. And if the board is going to have that sort of support, we need to be looking at that for next year. I don't have a funding amount placed. I've left it as TBD, but I do feel it's important to bring that to your attention as you're making budget decisions. And finally, I have $1.4 million for school counselors. We know that wraparound supports and social emotional supports for kids, school counselors play an essential role. The state has put out new ratios for school guidance counselors, and at elementary school, that ratio, again, it doesn't take effect next year. It's not till FY22, and it's not funded in the governor's budget, but the ultimate ratio, the desired vision, is 250 to 1. That represents a significant lower ratio than what we have currently in Fairfax at the elementary level. I know it hasn't become a state requirement yet, but I think it's time for us to begin the hiring of school counselors to support that ultimate state goal. One of the things I wanted to also do is highlight for you and for our community the work we're doing to try to have a budget that really is about every child by name and by need. And that's particularly important for special education and for investing in intervention and prevention for kids so that they can be successful no matter where they are as a student in Fairfax County Public Schools. In this budget that I proposed, again, $3.5 million for a new unprecedented chair position in the elementary schools that would, again, impact up to 70 of our elementary schools. Substance abuse prevention specialist, restraint and seclusion compliance person, and behavioral intervention supports. That's just in this budget. In recent budgets, we've done additional positions for mental health supports for psychologists and social workers. We spent over $2 million in FY18 for that. Last year, in this year's budget, we created behavioral intervention teachers, or BITs, additional behavior folks who can come in and support schools as they're dealing with and staff is dealing with challenging behaviors. We've also got to work with the county to help us with substance abuse prevention with some additional dollars. And we really thank the county for continuing to work to collaborate with us on One Fairfax around we all have a role to support our children in our community. A few more dollars in skilled nursing services, and we also invested this year in an ombudsman position focused on special education for our ombudsman office. I also want to call your attention to just overall special education enrollment and demographic growth, focusing on those kids represented in 2019, a little over 8 million, this year a little over 2 million, and next year, again with that increased special education growth of over $12 million. Responsible resource stewardship is important as we look at a budget. And I want you to know each year we participate in something called WABE. It's, you know what, and I've said I should know what it is. It's the Washington Area, what? Board of Education. You all remember it better than I. And it tries as best it can. Of course, nobody can compare directly the different sizes of schools. But it certainly does say what is the cost per pupil. And it lets our community know how much each system is investing per kid. We rank 5th in the middle of the pack around these surrounding divisions with that indicator. Let me show you the FY21 overview. Overall, our beginning balance was just slightly down from last year. The county transfer request that I'm asking for in this budget is $89.7 million. That's just a little bit more than I asked for last year when I asked for $84.4 million. We do see in this budget sales tax and state aid at 69.2. That is an increase from the state from before, a nice increase, but I need you to know, while we are happy that the state has continued to invest more in local education, this is just now getting us back inflation adjusted, to the levels of state support from 2009. So truthfully, we are catching up state aid-wide to where we were a decade before. You see, federally, with all the federal mandates and requirements, we are not seeing gains from the federal government. We're not seeing cuts either. Basically, we are seeing flat revenue from the federal. You'll also see some revenue from the city of Fairfax. They pay a tuition payment for their contract with Fairfax County Schools, and there's some additional dollars in other revenue that we can talk about at our work session or as the board chooses. Let me show you a few future considerations for the budget. As I mentioned to you already, the Board of Education has prescribed new standards of quality, or SOQs as you may hear them called, and many of them focus on the social emotional support that we're focused on. It's the right thing to be focused on: school counselors, psychologists and social workers, support for English language learners. All of those are wonderful ideas, and they're not yet adopted by the General Assembly and funded, but ultimately if they become embedded in the SOQ, the additional costs for all of it, and again, I don't have the breakdown yet, state and local, would be a total of $40 million. So as we look at these social emotional supports, we know that we're going to have to begin to really keep in mind that these wraparound supports do bring additional cost to the locality. We also need to look at some local FCPS challenges. I know there's been discussion, and the board, prior to you all, in a follow-on motion, asked me to look at middle school start times. I have started that preliminary review. I do not have a proposed operational plan for middle school start times in the FY21 budget. However, I am more than glad to work with this board to schedule a work session to share with you the work that we have done around those middle school start time plans and to solicit your feedback and counsel. I also want to bring you to the issue of critical capital and infrastructure requirements. This is a conversation we've had with the Board of Supervisors over many years. We have $172 million in capital infrastructure needs every year, and we're only getting about $12, $13 million to deal with those. Those things like deferred maintenance, chillers, HVAC systems that continue to not get done, much like we work to try to accelerate on our CIP, which is not here, this is the operating budget, but our CIP, where we want to renovate schools every 25 years right now, right? That would be our goal, but the money that we have only has us on a 37-year renovation cycle. So we're behind in the renovation of our schools, and we're behind in the actual infrastructure and maintenance of our schools as well. So those remain real challenges, but challenges that I believe through collaboration with the Board of Supervisors and our Chief Operating Officer, Marty Smith, is already engaged in those discussions with them, where we can begin to think even more as one Fairfax and out of the box about infrastructure needs are not just Fairfax County school needs, they're their entire county needs. I want to return to where I began, that investing in excellence is what this budget is about. Fairfax has had a legacy of excellence for decades. People have come here to have a world-class education. The challenge is, our challenge still is, does every parent, does every child by name and by need experience that excellence, feels that excellence, tastes that excellence? And many in our community still feel, and many on this board, that we still have fallen short of that standard to support every child. This budget, I believe, is a step in the right direction to do that work. We have focused on our people and compensation for them, and we focused on our students and wraparound support for them. And I believe with premier workforce and student success and those expenditures focused on those areas, we can continue to be a system that works to build equity for every child, excellence for every child, and that we know every child by name and by need, and they get the kind of education, they get the kind of opportunity, they get the kind of access, and they get the kind of achievement, the achievement of excellence that every child deserves in Fairfax County Public Schools. I want you to see in the next slide about being involved in the process, which you all will be, of course, but also our community. We're going to have opportunities to talk about the budget moving forward. To be able to speak at a school board meeting, we have the information. To be able to speak at a board of supervisors public hearing, we have the information. And we will be having all this information. In fact, I know all of this budget information is now posted on our website, right, Mr. Torrey? So it's all up there for you to go to www.fcps.edu/budget to see this information. And we are hopeful that you will. And let me show you just on the next slide, there's also a calendar process for the FY21 budget. You can see that we'll be holding work sessions and public hearings, and then the school board will be adopting the advertised budget on February 6th. And then the process will continue with conclusion of the adoption of the budget in May. It's an honor to be superintendent in Fairfax County Public Schools. Many of you know, these board members know that I came here over 25 years ago as an intern, and it is an honor and privilege to serve as superintendent. And I look forward with our leadership team and this new board to working together in a collective partnership to bring excellence and equity to every child in Fairfax County Public Schools.